The Radicals, Fundamental Principles of Freedom, Radical Self-Interest, and Individual Rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? Tuesday. It's Tuesday night. It's been a busy week already. I'm ready for the weekend. I'm heading out tomorrow, traveling tomorrow, and then I got a seminar on the weekend, back home Sunday night. So it'll be a fun rest of the week, but I'm ready to get out of here. All right. Today we've got our Q&A with our supporters. So Adam, Nick, Daniel, and Ryan are here. Maybe one or two additional people are going to join. We'll see. Had a couple more people supposed to join. We'll see. They might show up late. And of course, we've got our super chat going. Ali is in the house, so she'll be monitoring you guys and watching and making sure that we get to our goal of $600. And there is, I knew Jonathan was supposed to join us. So let's promote Jonathan to panelist. And Jonathan, you should be able to ask to start video there. You should be able to start your video if you want to. Same with you, Ryan. You also should be able to start the video if you want to do so. Jonathan will start the video later. All right, that's fine. They don't want to be seen right now. Later, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stay off video.
That's fine.
I've got that not so fresh feeling tonight, Yaron. Thank you.
I have that not so fresh feeling every night, and look what I do for the cause. Look what I do for you guys. But all right, so you guys all know how this goes. We're going to go through the panel. We're going to have them each ask a question. Then we're going to go to the super chat. If there are any super chat questions, we're going to give priority to $20 or more. We've got a goal again of $600. Generally, wow, we already got 2 thumbs down. So somebody doesn't like me before I even start. But before you leave, don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you like the show. Don't forget to share. I see more of you. This is good. More of you were sharing the debate. I saw definitely bump up in the sharing of the debate after I asked you to share it. So thank you for doing that. We are going to go to the Q&A. Of course, you can support the show on a monthly basis on yaronbrookshow.com/support and on Patreon and Subscribestar. And let's see. Yeah, I think we're ready to go. All right, we'll start with left to right. So I've got Adam on my left. So Adam, you get to go first.
Okay, this is a continuation of a question I asked in SuperChat previously, but I would like to go over it again because I think Ayn Rand has a deep insight on the question of what overcoming obstacles does to a person's strength and persistence and personality in the person of Reardon in Atlas Shrugged.
Yep.
And I'd like to start with page 30, where he recollects his overcoming his first obstacle. After a while, he realized he was thinking of the past, the next paragraph. He saw the day when he stood on a rocky ledge and felt a thread of sweat running from his temple to his neck. He was 14 years old, and it was his first day of work in the iron mines of Minnesota. He was trying to learn to breathe against the scalding pain in his chest. He stood cursing himself because he had made up his mind that he would not be tired. After a while, he went back to his task. He decided that pain was not a valid reason for stopping.
Yep.
And then whenever he faces a really tough situation after that, that was from page 30. On page 215, he's facing a bad situation. And what does he think of? His first day on the ledges of the ore mines.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives him strength to do something extremely powerful. I'm not giving away the plot.
Yeah, don't give away the plot. So you want to summarize it, and then you want to summarize the point you're trying to make?
Essentially, overcoming obstacles gives Reardon an extra strength in dealing with whatever tough situations he faces throughout the book.
Yep.
So it's a lifelong advantage. And I think the lifelong advantage that overcoming obstacles confers on a person is something that university admissions officers, people examining job applications and so on.
Now I remember the
need
question.
to
Okay.
be aware of.
I think they can be aware of, but look, I don't think that it's the overcoming the obstacles that does it. It's what do you do with the overcoming the obstacles? I know lots of people who've overcome obstacles and have done nothing with their lives. I think it's what you make of it. Reardon, this is an important discovery about himself. He learns about himself. He internalizes. He makes something of it. I know a lot of people who've overcome obstacles, but don't do that, so they don't get that extra oomph that Reardon obviously gets, that extra confidence. And then I know people who haven't overcome obstacles in their life, not those kind of obstacles, maybe smaller scale obstacles that they do great. So I don't know what college admissions should look at. I'm not an expert. It's a question for psychologists. It's an empirical question in terms of what characteristics lead people to be successful, whatever the college admissions set as the standard that they want to apply. It's not clear to me that if you're trying to get into MIT and you want to be a scientist or an engineer, it really depends. What is the university looking for, and what are you looking for from an education? So it's what you're going to do in life from now on, rather than
exactly, and that's why it's not a good idea to list your obstacles on your admissions essay, as you had suggested, because that should be devoted to what you're going to accomplish. But you know, growing up as a Jew in communist Poland, I've had my share of obstacles.
Sure.
And I have used that experience over and over, just like Reardon does in Atlas Shrugged. And there have been cases where, you know, I was part of a group of 6 people trying to solve a problem, and we'd spent 3 days trying to solve it. And then on the 4th day, I reminded myself I'd solved tougher problems than that.
Bigger problems.
And then I became aware of having this solution.
I mean, look, that's absolutely the case. And then it's a question of how many people was born in communist regime and were Jews, and experienced similar challenges to use, and nothing came of them. So it's what you make of that experience and how you use it and what you do with it. And yeah, I mean, the essay can convey that. And I think that what a college reader for a particular university would look for is what you've learned from those challenges rather than the existence of the challenge. I don't remember saying list all the challenges. I'm not saying I didn't say it because I just don't remember the question or my answer. I remember the question vaguely, but I don't remember my answer. But
yes, I think it's.
I worry about standards like that, because then if somebody hasn't had a challenge in their life, didn't grow up under communism, didn't have anything like that happen, that's not a black mark either, right? That doesn't mean they can't live up to challenge.
No, and
doesn't mean they can't be successful. So, it's what you do with what happens to you when you're young, and how you relate to it, and how you coalesce that to achieve something that what matters.
yes,
Anyway.
and it's a difficult problem for not only for psychologists, but for data scientists to try to make predictions on the basis of a person's previous experiences. But I'm certainly not in favor of anything that would diminish the prospects of a person just because they haven't faced obstacles.
Yep.
And so I'm all for admitting students who had all the advantages in the world, and job applicants too, for the same reason. At the same time, it is one of many factors. I think when one writes a college essay, and it's limited to some number of words, the only thing I wrote about and that anyone would write about is what they want to accomplish. And there should be other ways of finding out what obstacles a person has faced.
I don't have a strong opinion here. It's striking as a specialized thing. I mean, I didn't write an essay for college admission. There were no essays. They looked at your grades, thumbs up, thumbs down, and that was it. Grades and on test scores and stuff like that in high school. And I'm glad I didn't have to write an essay, because I hate those kind of essays. I do poorly at essays like that, and I don't do well in interviews. I don't know. I find it very difficult to answer the kind of canned questions that are typically asked at interviews. It reminds me of some of the questions I get asked here where I just can't remember. Like, what books do you recommend? I can't remember any books when you ask me that question. My mind goes blank about all the books that I've read.
Yeah, but there are other things in a student's record that MIT, for example, looks at.
Sure. And it's a science, and I'm open to whatever the science presents itself as. These are markers for future success for any given individual, for a group of individuals, and they're going to be errors in the system, because they're going to be exceptions to whatever kind of rule an admissions officer comes up with. That's, I think, the nature of the kind of thing. You can't extrapolate. Not everybody who experiences the childhood that Reardon experiences becomes Reardon. Not everybody who experienced Adam's childhood becomes Adam. So it's the admissions officer needs to look at what are the things that, I know a lot of people who face adversity as childhood, and the result is the exact opposite of what you projected. They don't live up to it. So that will come across in an essay. And I guess that's what the admissions, who is that? Debbie?
Yeah, this is Debbie. I was just thinking, overcoming obstacles, does it have to mean facing adversity? because you could pick Francisco while we're in effortless shrugs and say, well, my obstacle was that my like whatever trillionaire father wouldn't let me work in the copper mine, but I really wanted to experience in a copper industry. So I had to go out and found my own copper mine in order to achieve that goal. That's an obstacle that he overcame. It's not adversity. So, I mean, like you could spin it that way too, and just say like, here's something I was trying to accomplish in my life. It wasn't some negative thing imposed on me by the outside, but it was an obstacle nonetheless, and I overcame it. And so like, who wouldn't? I'd admit Francisco or hire him or whatever.
Well,
Based on that.
Yeah.
the other side of that, I was recently reading a memoir of a Canadian woman writer from a Chinese family, and her parents insisted that she was going to be an actor. She wanted to be a writer. She started writing at age 3, and by the time she was 14, as long as she was home, her parents wouldn't let her spend her time writing, just studying things relevant to medical school. And she actually ran away from home at age 14 and made her own way. So,
I mean, you can find examples of these things all over the place, and it's the individual who makes what they make from the particular circumstances that they have. Okay, we have to move. Let me admit this. Who is this? How do I admit them? Right, I have no idea. We'll allow them to talk. All right, Nick. Nick, you're muted. You're muted.
Hello?
Yep, there we go.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to pick off on the subject you talked about the other day with supply chains. And I wanted to take it a step further in terms of talking about inflation, because it has major inflation implications. So the classic example of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods, correct?
Yep.
All right. So in this circumstance with these supply chains, we're getting it from the other end. Not only do we have too much money chasing too few goods, now we got too few goods, even fewer goods, right? Because they're not getting there because of transportation issues, labor shortages. Now we also have input costs, such as oil, going through the roof. So there's all these factors and all the misallocations you talked about. I listened to your talk in terms of COVID misallocations of essentials versus non-essential, the constraints. So what I'm trying to get at, I'm trying to figure out, is this going to be inflation? Like, this sounds like it's going to be inflation on steroids. It's like a different type of inflation. It's not like, I mean, I'm looking at the history of inflationary periods, the Weimar Republic, then the 1970s when we got to 20%, hyperinflation in Argentina. So, I mean, I'm trying to understand this particular type, the particular type of circumstances we have, which you talked about, and the implications, because we're getting it from both ends. Not only are we getting it from the money supply, we're getting it from the other end in terms of goods are not getting to market, and goods, input costs of goods are going through the roof.
The real question is, prices could go up, but the real question is it permanent? Is the inflation sustainable? So let's say, I don't know, something happens, the supply chains are broken, there are too few goods, people are demanding them, so they're bidding the prices up, so prices go up. But then as soon as the goods come in, right, as soon as the supply chains are fixed, prices will drop, right? Prices will adjust back down because now, there's more supply, and therefore supply and demand will meet, and prices will therefore come down. That's what's meant by when the Biden administration, where many economists say they expect this inflation to be transitory. That is, that it is only going to be as a consequence of the shock to the system, that it's not sustainable, that it won't keep going, right? Now, even if it's transient, what does transient mean? Does that mean a few months? Does that mean a few years? Does it go up to 15% and then come down? Does it go up to 4% and then come down? Have we peaked? There is a ton of questions associated with what is going on right now in the economy. There's a ton of questions associated with whether we're going to have inflation, how big of an inflation it's going to be, and for how long. I've been trying to figure this out, and I don't have an answer.
Well, is there a historical precedent in terms of past? You know, I gave you the 5 examples: the Weimar Republic, the inflation of the 70s, the Argentinian hyperinflation. Is there anything that mimics
certainly
the
similarities
circumstances today?
There's certainly similarities to the 1970s, but the 1970s, you know, there are also things that are different about the 1970s. There is a big controversy about how much money is actually being created by the Fed, whether there is a lot of money circulating or whether there isn't. Certain money measures have not spiked, but M3, for example, has. Is M3 the right number? Are other M numbers the right number? Look, in a sense, the whole field of inflation and the measures of money and control of money, we've only been doing this for about 50 years in the current form with a sophisticated global financial market. That is since 1971, when we went off Bretton Woods. And I think the economic knowledge is not quite there. If you look at financial markets, who are pretty smart people, right? They don't think there's inflation. The inflation premium on inflation-adjusted bonds pegs long run inflation, long run being the next few years, at 2 point something. It doesn't peg it very high. Now, markets can be wrong. Markets are often wrong. Indeed, with regard to inflation, markets are often wrong. You know, somebody like Peter Schiff thinks we're heading towards hyperinflation tomorrow. You know, this wouldn't be the first time that many economists, particularly libertarian economists, think we're heading towards hyperinflation tomorrow. So, you know, my answer is the one that is least media friendly. I don't know. You know, the world is screwed up. The monetary system's screwed up. We've got screwed up supply chains. We've got mismatches with regard to supply and demand. How that exactly manifests itself in prices over the long run, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about price inflation, not monetary inflation. We don't even have a good measure of monetary inflation. We don't know how to measure it. I don't know, and I don't think. And I now long term, we're going to have inflation because the government can't keep up with the debt. But is that now? Is that in 5 years? Is that, you know, in 10 years? You know, I don't know. It could be tomorrow. It could be now. This could be the big one. This could be the complete collapse of the dollar. I don't think so, but it could be. You know, and you know, these supply chain issues are not going to permanently raise prices because the supply chain issues are not permanent. The ships are out there. They haven't sunk. They're just not being efficiently.
Yeah, but they're coming from everywhere. We got chip shortages, so used cars are going.
Not chip shortages. There are no chip shortages. There are no chip shortages.
No. Chips, computer chips.
But again, this is all an aspect of the distortions that happened during COVID. The chip shortages will be fixed at some point, and at that point, you know, prices of chips will come down, and so will all the things that use chips.
What about input costs like oil and copper?
Well, hold on, because there are 20 miles of ships with an S at the beginning.
Yep.
waiting to be unloaded around the port of Los Angeles.
Yes.
And the reason for this is that one of Trump's attempts to get people to buy American was to institute a host of regulations against unloading imports in American ports. And those regulations have not gone away, widened somehow. I don't know whether it's the influence of the unions, whether
Biden's always been,
at play.
the Democrats are not pro-free trade. But look, all those things exist. But that is not the problem right now. The problem is not import restrictions. Those exist. They're going to make prices in the US higher, not for monetary inflation reasons, but just because when you tax American people and goods, and when you make it more difficult to transport them, and when you create barriers to entry, that happens. The long trail of ships outside of Los Angeles is almost directly related to COVID and to the restrictions and lockdowns and mask regulations and all that. It's not only in the US, other countries have the same kind of backlogs of incoming and outgoing ships. Containers are in the wrong places because there was a shortage of truck drivers during COVID because they wouldn't go out and drive, so they didn't move the containers to the right places. There's just a mess created by government policy during COVID that is going to take probably a year or two to clear. And while Trump's tariffs and all the stuff the Trump administration did is a barrier to speeding that up, it is not something that the market can't, the market will adjust and prices will be higher, and that's it. And our standard of living will be marginally lower, but the supply chain won't be hurt. The supply chain will continue to function. It'll just continue to function at whatever level these new prices will dictate. What we're seeing right now in the oil shortages are primarily a product of, again, policy under European primarily administrations. There's no shortage of gas in the United States. The shortages are all in Europe. And the reason there's a shortage is regulation in the United States not to export gas. So we can't relieve the shortages overseas, even though we have a surplus, because we're not allowed to, or there are big restrictions on export. And in addition, which the Trump administration supported these restrictions. But there's also, it has to do with the fact that OPEC is not increasing supply. It has to do with the fact that pipelines were never built. It has to do with the fact that Germany went off of nuclear. It has to do with the fact that Britain has invested gazillions of dollars in windmills in the North Sea, and the wind is not blowing when they want it to blow and they need electricity. It only blows when it blows. The fact that in Germany and in the UK, they've invested heavily in solar panels. If anybody's ever been to the UK and Germany knows that the sun never literally shines in these places, ever, except for 1 week last month when I was actually in London and the sunshine. I mean, these are policy mistakes. It has to do with the conflict with Russia and not enough gas, and the fact that Russia doesn't want to pump all this gas voluntarily. They don't mind Europe having a crisis right now. And it's just mind-boggling.
It's going to be a very cold winter.
Well, unless suddenly, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if this happens, they discover that, this was all exaggerated and there's actually plenty of natural gas, which I wouldn't be surprised, because our media and everybody else tends to exaggerate these things and tends to turn everything into a catastrophe. And if you look at the US is not pumping any additional natural gas because the natural gas companies don't have an incentive to do it. If they do, they'll be accused of taking advantage of a crisis and of polluting the air, and they'd rather sit in their reserves and wait their time and bide their time. Prices are going up. You'd think there'd be more drilling. There isn't much, again, because people like BlackRock won't provide capital to drill more oil because it's anti-ESG and it's not socially responsible to actually drill for oil. So you've got all these things overlaid one on top of the other, all happening at once, which are resulting in major global shortfalls. And it's a problem. And of course, the whole world is, and I think, entering a period of slow to no economic growth. We just saw in numbers out of China where the economic growth is way lower than it has been historically in China. And if you believe the Chinese numbers, generally China is doing everything in its power to slow economic growth. And it might be on purpose because they might want to spend some time redistributing wealth because they've decided that they want more wealth equality rather than allowing for wealth creation. Who knows what's going on in those crazy dictators' minds? But all we can say is we're heading towards real economic turbulence. We're heading towards really economic bad times. The gold price is not indicating super inflation. Gold is not going through the roof right now. If you believe the Bitcoiners, that Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge against inflation, it is going up. So maybe that's the inflationary sign. I don't know. I don't get it. But I think all we can say right now is the world's in a mess. Economic growth is going to be constrained. Prices are probably going up in the short run. Hard to tell what's going to happen in the long run. And, wages are also going up. So most of the American people will not see a decline in the standard of living because wages are going up, because the fact is there's a job shortage. Unions are emboldened. Unions are going on strike, not because of the Biden administration, but because there's a labor shortage. So unions feel like they have upper hand in terms of bargaining power. Caterpillar, what's the labor union that does auto? This is the first strike in like 35 years at the Caterpillar plants. That's because they feel emboldened by the shortage of labor. That is a direct result of Trump's and now Biden's restrictions on immigration. The fact that there are not enough immigrants coming in. We've got massive shortage of labor across the entire country, particularly in construction, but across all these industries. And we're in an economic mess, but that shouldn't surprise anybody that we're in an economic mess. The UK did Brexit. They got all excited about Brexit. This is great. We'll set our own economic policy. They got a free trade deal with Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And they said, great, we are now an independent free trade island. They didn't cut a free trade deal with anybody else. They didn't lower tariffs to zero, as I recommended. And then all the regulations that they considered a burden from the European Union, they've imposed on themselves, right? So they just took all the regulations of the European Union and they imposed on. And then the conservative government of the UK wants to be more aggressive than the EU in achieving carbon neutrality, whatever the hell that means. I guess death for everybody is what it means. So they are building more windmills in the North Sea to provide even less electricity. The world's insane. I mean, and the European Union, I mean, is a complete and utter disaster. The only country in good shape in the European Union, as strikingly nutty as that may be, is France, because France produces 70 to 80% of its electricity from nuclear power, and it is exporting power to the UK. That's how nutty the world is. It goes under the channel, and the UK is getting nuclear power from France. But it's a mess. It's a mess. But I think one of the things that I've learned over many, many years of trying to do this is that macroeconomic prediction is a fool's game. Now, maybe somebody out there is good at it, but I haven't met them. If you cry wolf every year, sometimes you'll be right. If you're an optimist every single year, mostly you'll be right. That's the amazing thing, right? If you actually think that the stock market's going to go up every year and technology is going to be better and human life is going to be better, almost always you're right, because the stock market almost never goes down. That's a reality. So we'll have a day of reckoning. I don't know how long it'll be. I don't know when it's going to be. It will happen. Stock markets will go down. Economic disasters will happen. But I'm not going to predict it. And same with inflation. I'm reading economists I really admire across the spectrum of kind of free market economists. Some are predicting 15% inflation by the end of this year. Others are saying, the money supply actually hasn't increased that much. Maybe we'll get a small spike, but the Fed is actually doing a decent job. at increasing the money supply in accordance with demand for money. And I see everything in between. And then you've got people like, people who say it's not going to just be 15%. The dollar is going to be collapse, and the whole world is going to abandon the dollar as the standard. And the era of the dollar is over. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But in the spectrum of 0 to 15%, I doubt 15%. I doubt 0. But I don't know where inflation is going to be and how long it's going to last. And I'm an economist, and I still don't know. So, I'm somewhat of an economist.
This is an evolving situation. But if you have any thoughts as this thing evolves with the, now that we've covered the supply chain, let us.
Absolutely,
let us know.
I intend to update you on the state of these things as they happen, and try to figure out if there's an economist out there. John Cochrane, who I have a huge amount of respect for, and seems to be always level-minded and really, really rational about these things, and not. I mean, he believes we're heading at some point towards 70s-like inflation. He believes that the government right now is behaving like the 70s government did, that the Fed is behaving very similar to the government. So, that's John Cochrane. I really respect him and admire him. And if you think about the 70s, a lot, the inflation begun, but then the real kicker was the oil crisis of 73. The oil crisis of 73 didn't cause inflation, but it kind of accelerated trends that were already doing it. We've got a kind of crisis right now. The supply chain might be it. Things that trigger inflation expectations could really change things. And of course, markets didn't expect inflation back then either, and we got it. That's another thing John Cochrane always says. Bond markets never anticipate it. It's always a surprise. Inflation always surprises people. And it's a surprise because it's exposed, it's easy to see. But while you're living it, it's very difficult to identify the causes and the chain reaction that brings it about. I have thought we've had ridiculously low interest rates for 30 years, basically. Luckily, I didn't invest based on that thought, because if I had, I would have lost my shirt, right? I wanted to short bonds in the mid-90s. God, talk about a bad trade. All right, Daniel, who knows about trading? Yeah.
I find it interesting that I asked you in January if inflation might get to 5% this year. And at the time, that sounded a little outrageous, as far as expectations, but things have come a long way in a few months.
Yep. Yeah, we're at 4.5 on an annualized basis right now.
That's right.
Yep.
I want to go back to a UVA survey you looked at, where they talked to people who voted for Biden, talked to people who voted for Trump. And your conclusion, which I agree with, is that people are largely the same. I mean, they may be arguing about little things, but largely they are the same.
On economic issues, right?
That's right. I'm shocked, first of all, that the people who did the study conclude exactly the opposite thing, that there's this huge divide between them. And they mention very lightly, the people agree on censorship and authoritarian governments, but we're not going to worry about that. There's this huge divide because Trump people don't like Biden and Biden people don't like Trump.
It's the fact that they hate each other that is the cause of the divide. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, and that's what we have to find this compromise where
stop hating each other.
Censorship's okay, but we got to stop hating each other. I'm shocked, and all I can think of is, they're looking at the same data you are, right? The same study, they wrote it. You can't argue with people about statistics, stuff like this. It's got to go to a deeper level somewhere, right? It's like, where are your priorities?
Yep.
If getting along is more important than censorship, we're in a world of hurt.
Well, yes, and getting along, of course, is the way to deal with this. Having censorship is the way in which we deal with getting along. one way to get along is to have authoritarianism and everybody just follow the leader, and then everybody gets along, and whoever doesn't is shot. And then you secure that everybody gets along, because if you don't, there are serious consequences to not getting along. And that's what scares me. It scares me that if you could find a voice who could unite the left and right under the banner of the things they agree about, which is a big banner.
Scary.
It's scary. That's why I always thought it's religion and environmentalism. Those are the two things that I think could unite left and right. And if you could somehow deal with the race stuff, although I don't think that's essential, if you could get environmentalism, particularly if there's some kind of crisis or perceived crisis like energy or whatever, and then you bring in religion and nationalism, then you could really unite some in the left and some on the right. And that's where it gets really scary. And then censorship, both have given up on it already.
And that's the thing, is if they agree on censorship, then you're not allowed to express ideas that are unpopular. So,
because you're creating discord.
That's
and
right.
you're creating the deeper issue here is the complete irrational. We live in a culture that's deeply irrational, and that is as a consequence, what we're seeing is the rise of tribalism, so the tribe of the left and the tribe of the right, like most tribes in history, are pretty similar. They don't really disagree on that much, but they hate each other because they're different tribes. And there are a few issues they disagree on. I don't know, they disagree on transgenders. But, and they're willing, I guess, to go to war over how many bathrooms we should have or something like that. I don't know. Or how many times transgender should appear in the New York Times. But that's the level of it, because on government involvement in the economy, on free speech, on things, they don't disagree. It's who the victim is. Who's the bigger victim? Is it the Christians are the victims, or is it transgender and LGBTQ plus or whatever it is these days are the bigger victims? That's the debate. And as I've said many times, at the extremes, at the far left, far right, it's about, are you a racist who's pro, black, or are you a racist who's pro-white? But they agree on the racism too, at the very edges of this thing. So I don't know, it's very difficult to be optimistic. On the other hand, as I said before, as an economist, pessimism, it's very rare that pessimism pays off. As an investor, the good outweighs the bad overwhelmingly over history, over the history, at least over the last 200 years. And I don't know that we shifted to a new historical paradigm. So in spite of everything, innovation, progress, technology somehow, keeps us afloat. The Dagneys, the Reardons, even the John Galts of the world have not gone on strike. They're still holding the world up.
The thing that totally shocks me, though, is that something like 20% of the people are in favor of censorship, because if that goes through, it's game over, right?
Yeah, that's where having a constitution really matters. Because so far the courts have been better than the rest of the institutions at protecting us against real censorship.
Yeah.
All right, we are running way, and we've got a bunch of people. All right, Debbie.
Hi, Ron.
Hey.
So I'm wondering if you've heard of something that's referred to as the Great Attrition. Have you heard that phrase?
The Great Attrition, or the?
Yeah, attrition. Yes. So you haven't heard it?
So maybe I've heard of it.
It's
so
interesting. Yeah.
So what does it mean? I think you should turn off the video because you're spotty in and out. So without the video, I think we can hear you more consistently.
Okay. Yeah. The video and I don't get along, I guess.
Yeah.
Not when I'm on my phone anyway. So yeah, it's this phenomenon. And the reason I'm hurting about it is because my company's hurting from it, and a lot of companies are hurting from it right now. And basically it's this thing that's been going on starting this year, where a lot of people, like not just,
Resigning, they're quitting.
yeah, they're quitting, and it's not just people who are like kind of wage hourly workers and they're getting paid more to stay home, so they stay home. It's
Yep.
like white collar workers, engineers, even VPs, and just all different kinds of job levels, professionals, and they're not necessarily leaving the workforce, but they are leaving their current jobs and maybe going to some other company, or like,
Yep.
I guess in some cases maybe they're leaving, and it's a strange phenomenon, but it's attrition levels are way up.
Yep.
At my company, at all companies I know of anyway. So, but and it's hard to pinpoint what's causing this. There's different articles out there in the world that speculate about reasons, like that run the gamut of people feel that they're disconnected from their organizations, or that they're not valued. They're just simply reflecting on their life because it's
Yep.
been such a change
COVID.
working remotely. And they're just reevaluating what they want to even do with their lives. And I mean, if people are really reflecting on what do I want out of life and those kinds of things, like that's probably a good thing. If they're thinking seriously about that and reevaluating what direction they want to go. It's painful for employers, I can tell you that. And it's like
Yep.
crushingly difficult to hire. We're trying to hire like as much fast as many people as we can. And like in the job market, at least in Silicon Valley, it is like, whoa, if you need a job, come out here. But yeah, so what do you think about this phenomenon?
So it's definitely going on. It's the highest rate of resignations, of people leaving jobs ever recorded in the United States. We're currently experiencing. More people are quitting, leaving their jobs than ever. At the same time, unemployment rates are pretty low. 4.8% is historically very low. It's not as low as before COVID, but it's very, very low. And also add to that, there are more job openings right now. I think 10 million is the number or something like that. More job openings than ever in American history. That is, more jobs are going unfilled than ever. So this is, again, I think, a consequence of COVID in multiple directions. First, the distortions of a COVID economy and of the government intervention are hard to keep track of. But it's not true that all the distortions have to happen or do happen in the markets for goods. They also happen in the markets for labor. Labor gets misallocated, if you will, during times like when the government does central planning, the government starts intervening like it did on a scale unprecedented during COVID. Some companies get bailed out that shouldn't exist. Other companies, small businesses are allowed to go under, but then some of them get bailed out, and banks do well during this whole period. The whole thing is, it distorts all the price signals. All the price signals become meaningless because they're all influenced by the central planners. There's no pure, real price signals anymore. And so some of that is, this is kind of a people feel like I can earn more money somewhere else because of all these job openings. Wages are generally going up, but the employers maybe are not fast enough to adjust wages to their existing employees. So employees are leaving and going somewhere else that does appreciate that. Wages seems to be going up. It's not a bad time to leave a job. Wait a little bit, test the market, check out different employers. Since wages are probably going to be higher in 2 weeks than they are right now, even if I spend the next 2 weeks or a month looking for a job, big deal, I'll get compensated for that when I get my higher wage. Amazon can't find enough programmers. So starting salaries at Amazon are going through the roof right now. And yet established engineers, their wages are not adjusting in proportion because that's not how managers think. So they might feel like, wait a minute, starting person at Amazon is making 150. I have 10 years experience. I'm making 2 something. That doesn't make any sense. I should be making 300, 400, 500. I should leave and go test the market. So there's a lot of that going on. Again, I will point to immigration laws. Big part of the issue here that they're not, immigrants not only come in and they They fill out some of those 10 million open jobs. They compete with American workers, and they also start companies. But the consequence of all that is that there are massive distortions right now. Not only are there ships out in the ports waiting, but there are also employees doing things that they haven't done before. Now, part of that also could be people reevaluating their work-life balance. They've spent a lot of time at home. They've spent a lot of time with their family. Maybe they like that. Maybe they want to work part-time. Maybe they want a different job with different stress level. COVID certainly was a time of reflection. So it's hard to tell what's going on. But I can tell you that when things like this happen, it's usually because there's some distortion in the force, right? And in the economic force created by government policies, by monetary policy, by fiscal policy, that is creating this misallocation that's going on. It could be that people are introspecting and thinking, and that could be a good thing, maybe not, hard to tell, depending on how rational they are about it. But I think it's more likely to be a monetary government, distortion of allocation of resources phenomena and a shortage of workers that is creating these weird incentives for people. But we'll see.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to read the studies that come out after this and to see looking back, what caused all this.
Yeah, I mean, I could say anecdotally, someone in my company, a younger person earlier on in her career, reached out to me just to kind of like ask me questions about my career path. And she said it almost like she read it from an article, but I don't think she did. But she said, I've been just reflecting lately about what I want to do with my life. And I've been laser focused on my career, but I'm reevaluating where I want to go and what I want to do next. And it was like exactly that type of thing. I mean, of course, that's just anecdotal, not statistical. But I think there's another component, which is it's not quite just so simple as an economic dislocation, but it's like a ripple effect from this thing that the government forced us all to stay in our homes for a year and a half. And of course, that's going to have all kinds of unintended impacts. Yeah. And then what are the economic ripple effects of that going to be? So it's wild. It's wild
I know that young people in the workforce right now are demanding flexibility in terms of remote work. So a lot of the banks in New York would like the workers to all come back to the office, and workers are saying, no, we'll come back 3 days and we want remote work 2 days. There's a big move in Apple among young employees to demand more time at home. I think Apple's standing behind their decision to have everybody come back to the office. But a lot of firms in New York that I know of are not, and they're allowing people, and there's big battles within the firm. Should it be 20% of the time, 30% of the time, 40% of the time you're allowed to work from home? And then a lot of young people are going to say, to hell with this, in a job market where I can shift jobs, I'm going to go to the employer that's going to offer me the best incentives. And particularly when there's no immigration, there's no real competition. What this will be, wages will go up. That's great, particularly for the people who can afford to negotiate. But over time, what will happen is if the wages are not being driven primarily by increases in productivity, we all suffer from a lower standard of living and a lower quality of life. It might appear that we wanted to be home, but long-term we'll be paid less, even if in the short run we're being paid more because we're less productive from home, it turns out. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, I don't know if we're less productive at home. I mean, I think it depends on the job.
It depends on who you are, and it depends on the job. But I can tell you that a lot of young people who don't have the discipline are going to find that they are less productive working from home.
Yeah. I agree with that. But there's definitely, especially out here in Silicon Valley where people are spending 3 or 4 hours a day commuting. There's 3 or 4 hours a day that you're not wasting. So it varies. It varies. Yeah.
And I think I actually think that for older, more seasoned professionals, working from home is more productive. And I think for young people who still need to learn from their elders in many cases, working from home is less productive. I think it's the young people who are demanding to stay at home who have the most to gain by going to the office.
I agree with that. Yeah, yeah,
And
for sure.
it's going to be fascinating. But you see, I would have a lot more viewers if I said, this is an absolutely unmitigated disaster. This is all caused by fill in the blank, by platinum, because platinum is going to go through the roof because of these employment patterns. And, life in general is going to suck for the next 20 years. But I have this great cure for all of that. I don't know. I mean, it feels like I keep saying I don't know, and that's not what you're supposed to do if you want a lot of subscribers.
Maybe not, but I appreciate it. I mean, there's a lot of just really,
I know.
there's just a lot of weird stuff going on right now. It's kind of hard to say where it's leading, and some of it'll be good, some of it'll be bad.
I
But yeah,
agree.
I don't know is the right answer.
But I think there's no politically, economically, there's very little good is going to come of this, unfortunately. I mean, yes, some of us will have a better life-work balance. Some of us will be able to work more at home. That'll be a good outcome. But generally, the consequence of COVID and the consequence of the last couple of administrations are going to be a lower standard of living and lower economic growth. I think I think there's no doubt about that, at least not in my mind. All right, Jonathan.
Hey, Ron, thank you for an interesting show and interesting number of shows over the whole summer, really. Here's my question. Objectivism and Miss Rand obviously talks about a fetus as being a potential human, but not an actual human.
Yep.
Is it rational, therefore, to have a baby shower? And did you have baby showers for that exact reason?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's rational. I think it's, and people ask if a murderer kills a pregnant woman, and why is he tried for the murder of the fetus, even though it's only a potential not. Once the mother has chosen to have it, it has value to her, and it has a different significance. And a baby shower is to celebrate the coming of the baby. It's not to celebrate the baby right now. It's to celebrate the potential. It's to celebrate what's coming. And if you think about the gifts that are given during a baby shower, these are gifts for the baby for when it's born. But the decision has been made. You don't have a baby shower if you can have an abortion, right? So the decision has been made to have the baby. So the potential is going to become an actual. And that's what you're celebrating. You're celebrating the anticipation of the actualization of this potential. You're celebrating the decision the parents made. You're celebrating the success of getting to the third trimester. It's usually towards the end that you have the baby shower. You're celebrating the anticipation of the baby coming into the world. So it's definitely what you're celebrating is the potential becoming an actual. Not that it has become an actual yet, but that it's going to because of the choice the parents have made. Does that make sense?
And what do you think about the tradition, which I know you're aware of, within Judaism, of not having a baby shower?
Jews are pessimistic. Jews, culturally, it's not genetic, luckily. And Jews are embedded in many traditions, some of them pretty barbaric. So Jews have this tradition based on the fact that in 250 years ago and before that, a significant number of children did not make it to age 7 days. I'm talking about not 7 days. That is, many children died at childbirth, and many children died very closely after childbirth. So there are no celebrations until the Brit, until the circumcision. And circumcision is done day 7, is that right? Or day 10? I can't remember. It shows you how much I know. And about Judaism. And the reason the circumcision is done on that day is that's when you celebrate, because that's when, okay, it lived. It's okay. It's an existent. It's we can celebrate now. It's not going to die on us. I think that's horrible. It doesn't recognize advances made in medicine. It doesn't recognize the fact that babies don't die, 99%, I think I'm safe to say, or 99.9 99 point something percent of babies don't die in the first 7 days. If you've made it into the third trimester, your chances of having a healthy baby who lives to be 7 days old is overwhelming. It's close to 100% as it gets. 8 days. I'm corrected by the Jews in the audience, or maybe the non-Jews. I don't know. So it's just a relic of an old tradition, which has not taken into account modern day medicine. They call it's bad luck to celebrate the birth before the birth happens, which is again mystical and just silly. So I'm big on I love baby showers. I think they're great. And I think it's another aspect of tradition which needs to be reformed and needs to be abandoned and needs to be modernized and needs to accept the existence of modern medicine.
Great. Thanks for the answer and for all that you do.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, Ryan.
Hey, I'm a handful of podcasts behind, so forgive me if you've already discussed this, but I was just wondering what your thoughts, excitement level is for the announcement of the Ayn Rand University.
Oh, nobody's asked you about that. That's good. You see, you're not behind at all.
Yeah, let's do something positive.
The announcement was during the summer at the summer conference at Ocon. I'm excited by it. I think there's, I'm excited about the focus on training and creating and also hiring intellectuals. I've always been a proponent of this. In a sense, everything we've been doing at the Ayn Rand Institute has kind of led to this, to the idea of systematizing it and organizing it and providing for it. I think creating a faculty at the institute, a faculty that both teaches and writes and lectures and does all the different activities that a regular faculty would do, I think is a huge thing and a huge benefit, and will increase the production of intellectual content coming out of the institute by objectivists, and it will. And it's, of course, it's going to be a training ground for future intellectuals. That's always been, a mission. The first thing, one of the first things I did when I first started at the Institute was codify the Objectivist Academic Center, organize it, and hire Onkar Gate to kind of in-house philosopher to lead it. And since then, it's only grown, and now Tala's taking it to the next level. And I think that's fantastic, and I fully support it. And the idea is he's hoping for 100 graded students next year. And if you start extrapolating that and you get to several hundred a year, wow, I mean, that's a revolution if you can sustain that. And so I think it's terrific and fantastic, and I'm all for it.
Cool. As someone who's not really interested in an intellectual career, could you sell me on the value proposition of not just auditing the class, but actually enrolling, even if, I'm not looking to be a spokesman for objectivism in a public manner?
I mean, maybe this is not the answer Tal would like me to provide, but I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's philosophy for Reardon, and there's philosophy for, somebody teaching philosophy. And if you don't intend to be an intellectual, you don't need more than philosophy for Reardon. And I think you get the philosophy for Reardon by auditing the OAC. To be a full paying member, to do the homework, to do all that is probably more than most of us need, or most of you guys need, to live objectivism and to integrate it into your life. It can't hurt. So if you have the time and you can actually take the classes, then, it's great, particularly given that auditors often lose the motivation, and it's hard to stay motivated as an auditor. So, you might think auditing is great. I'll do this, but you don't benefit as much from it. So I think that's the only real advantage, but it's a question of also how much time you have and your own personal values. If you really, really want to understand the philosophy inside out, being a graded student is a great path to go. But otherwise, auditing is fine.
Hey, thank you.
Sure. All right, let's see. We got a couple of phone callers. One is a 917 area code. Who is this?
Hey, you're on. It's Andrew.
Hey, Andrew. Been a long time.
Yeah. Good to speak with you.
Yep.
Some advice question, asking for some advice. How would you, any tips for dealing with a rationalistic boss? I have one, and it creates a lot of work.
Yep.
It's like every assignment and task is about 4 times the amount of time that it should take, because we're covering like every single base instead of the essentialized bases and all kinds of stuff like that.
Is there any way to,
you had any thoughts?
It's a difficult question because it really depends on them being a rationalist is not enough information. How defensive are they? How open to criticism are they? How much communication can you provide? Can you kind of, when there's an assignment to be done, can you sit them down and say, hey, what about doing it this way? I think there's a shortcut here. Let's get right to the essentials. How do they respond to that? So it very much depends, I think, on the other, and many of them psychological issues that this boss has. Just being a rationalist is just not enough info, and it's very difficult to change people after a certain age. So you also have to take that into account.
If I could weigh in, that
Sure.
sounds to me, because I am a manager and I manage managers, and I have had many managers, and what that sounds like to me is micromanagement, not necessarily rationalism. And a lot of times that has to do with the lack of trust. And that's usually not directed at one specific individual, like as in she doesn't trust you, but it's that her outlook on the world. So
Yep.
I don't know what I've never successfully rehabilitated a micromanager. As far as I'm concerned, the thing to do is to just find a new manager if it's unlivable.
Yep. Yeah.
And I can tell you, like, I've had a lot of bad managers, and I have my current boss is absolutely amazing, and it's so much better. Your life will be so much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I agree. I agree with Debbie. I think all of that makes complete sense. And rehabilitating people generally, never mind managers, is very difficult. And rehabilitating a manager from the bottom up is almost impossible. To the extent that managers improve, it usually comes from the top down, but it's very difficult to do in any case. Sorry, Andrew.
I'll manage.
I'm sure you will. All right, area code 734.
Hi, Ron.
Hey,
Ron,
Jennifer.
it's Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hi. I was wondering about, clickbait, where the headline will say something like, numbers of COVID, let's say, have tripled from 1 to 3 and overnight or something. Well, no, they don't actually say 1 to 3. They just say they've tripled. And you have to read the article way down, 3/4 of the way down, to find out they're talking about the number 1 going to 3 out of a background of, 1 million or whatever.
Yeah.
But the headline makes it look like it's a lot worse
Sure.
than it actually is. I mean, how dishonest do you think that is compared to an actual lie?
You mean, how is it a lie, or is it some of them stupid, or some of them just confused? I mean,
like, is it dishonest? Like, do you think?
I think a lot of it's dishonest. A lot of it's dishonest. A lot of it is, we, the philosopher kings, know this crisis is much worse than what people are acting as if it is. So we're going to make it appear much worse. So we're going to emphasize how bad it is so that we get people's attention. So I think a lot of it is created by people in the media who have an agenda about how bad they want the crisis to be, or to be appeared. But the other issue is, I think there's also a lot of ignorance. A lot of people in the newspaper business have no clue about statistics, how to read them, how to use them, how to think about them, and they often manipulate the statistics mistakenly, not on purpose.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So I think it's a combination of dishonesty and ignorance. And ignorance on statistics is everywhere. I see it everywhere,
Oh,
even
yeah, me
among
too.
pretty
It's
smart
scary.
people.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, Corey. Corey from Australia. You calling in from Australia?
Yeah, I'm calling in from Australia.
He's got an
How are you?
Australian accent. I've always wondered if Corey actually has an Australian accent. I'm kidding.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had a question on, well, since I heard Jonathan bring up abortion, I want to know, it's a bit controversial and you get a lot of dislikes when that topic's brought up, but I was wondering, is it as simple as just the actual and the potential, or is there something more to it? So if we've got like a child that's brought into the world and you hear objectivists say, reason is the basis for rights or rationality. You could say a child does not yet have that reason as a full-grown adult. And therefore, if you were a rationalist, you could deduce, well, therefore, a child doesn't have rights, therefore you can kill it, blah, blah, blah. I was just thinking, would it be too rationalistic to say, well, the child is now an actual, and in that sense, it is now its mind is now working the same way a businessman or an entrepreneur's mind is working. Therefore, to stop it in that process is still a violation of its rights. Or is that a bit too?
I think that's right, but what if it turns out, as some people claim, and it might be true, I'm not a scientist, that the mind is already working in the womb, right. That the baby's senses are engaged in the final trimester, that people talk about it can hear sounds, it's some awareness is already happening. Does that change our position on abortion?
Okay, I have read those papers and I can tell you that they're absolutely false. There is no evidence whatever of consciousness before birth.
Maybe. I don't want to argue the point, because it's, from my perspective, it's a purely scientific point. There's no philosophical issue here one way or the other. It's purely an issue of science. If it turned out that was true, I still would say, individual human life only starts when you become an individual. And you're not yet, you're still part of the mother's body. You're not individuated. And I think that the individuation is the key. It's not that you've opened your eyes and you're now, in a sense, conscious. If it turns out that there's some level of consciousness in the womb, I don't think it changes the fact that you're not an independent, individuated entity. I'm not happy about, for a lot of reasons, about late-term abortions. I think I don't see why a woman would ever wait until the late term. It seems whimsical to me that somebody would want an abortion, unless, of course, there's a real health risk to the mother, or a real health, or the fetus is completely deformed, and there's going to be real, they're not going to have a life. Life is not going to mean anything to them. So. And that's why there's so few abortions in that last trimester, because it doesn't make any sense. No doctor wants to perform them, and very few people are irresponsible enough to wait until then to figure out, oh, I actually don't want a baby, so it just doesn't happen. But I think that the key point is it's a separate being, and yes, now on its path to fully. It's not fully realized its capacity as a rational being, but it is fundamentally got a human consciousness, engaged in human consciousness things. I mean, it's opened its eyes. It's starting to look at the world. It's starting to be aware. That's reason. It's not fully, but it's there, right?
And that's another interesting, just a quick point about you bringing up the life of the mother is in danger. I think I have heard even Ben Shapiro say, well, if there was a direct threat to the mother, then yes, okay, abortion would be, I think in his case, right. But then that brings up the question: well, why now? Why would you put the mother's life over the baby, if that makes sense? So they're sort of conceding the fact
you're
that the
right,
mother's life,
because the mother's life is the issue from the beginning, right?
Right.
You know, not wanting to have a child is life, right? Or wanting to have a child or not wanting to have a child, those are issues of life. It's not like medical is, and this is where the physical outpaces the spiritual, which is you know, for somebody like Ben Shapiro, should be the other way around. But he's emphasizing medical, which is the physical, over the spiritual. But it's always about the mother's life. And the mother not wanting to have a child that is then part of her life for the rest of her life. She wants independence. She doesn't want to make, you know, and that is the legitimizing part of the legitimization is her ownership of her own life and her own future.
Amen. All right, thanks, Yaron.
Sure, thanks, Corey. Thanks for the support. All right, let's do some super chat questions. We're going way over time today. Let's see. I've got a big one here. Yes, Michael, 300 Canadian dollars. That's amazing, Michael. Thank you. I really appreciate it. He writes, I was disappointed with Wolf. This is Richard Wolf, the socialist. He was just another bitter socialist, envious, denying history and evading reality. Absolutely. I was naive enough to think he would offer a version of socialism I hadn't considered. Not that I could be convinced. I was wrong. Were you surprised how weak he was in the debate? No, not really, because I'd watched his other debates. What surprised me in the other debates that he did was not how weak he was, but it's how weak his opponents were. That is, everybody gave him a free ride. So if he was given a free ride, it was easy for him, and he articulated this vision of socialism. The challenge to it was weak, and not forceful, and he came across looking okay, and he never got angry, and he didn't get vicious, and he didn't get this look in his face like a bit of a crazy, bitter, angry maniac. But I've also seen him do videos where he just responds to stuff, or he's in a Q&A or something, and he gets angry and vicious and nasty and has that look. So I knew that if I pushed enough buttons, he would become, that. And it doesn't take pushing the buttons, just means being principled and arguing the case for capitalism and not giving him an easy ride. So it didn't really surprise me. I was actually, I was not surprised at all that that's how he responded. For what that's worth. Okay, Jeffrey Miller, the owner of Rosella, says, thank you for mentioning Rosella the other night, and thanks for visiting. It was an honor. I recommended the We the Living DVD, so they have it on the way. Did my wife get the bag that they gave me? No, she didn't, because it's still in my suitcase because I haven't unpacked it. And she is now in Europe. She's on a plane on her way to Europe. So she'll get it when she gets back. I promise at some point I will unpack my bag. Actually, I'll do it tomorrow morning because I have to repack it for my flight tomorrow. But I will leave it out for her. So when she gets back in a couple of weeks, she will get it. So thank you. And as I said, when I mentioned the restaurant on the show, it was a terrific evening because the food was amazing and because the company was amazing. So thanks again. All right, Dave writes, Newton invented calculus to discover physics and gravity the same way Ayn Rand discovered objectivism in order to describe the perfect man in a novel. It seems that geniuses invent one field in order to enhance another. Yeah, I mean, there's something generalizable there. Geniuses leap so far ahead that often the tools to get to where they know they need to get, they know they can get to, don't yet exist. And not only do they make the leap in terms of the content, but then they have to make the leap in terms of the they also have to make the leap in terms of the tools to get them there. And often the tools are of massive import, as you described, the tool for Newton was calculus, and for Ayn Rand was objectivism. Of course, at the same time, Newton does it. What's his name? God, I had it a second ago.
Leibniz.
Leibniz, thank you, Debbie. Leibniz invented calculus. I don't know why. He just did. Because it was an interesting question about what happens to stuff as it approaches infinity. But he did it more from the perspective of mathematics rather than from the perspective of solving a physical problem. But Leibniz was a genius as well, who was primarily a philosopher, who kind of dabbled in physics and mathematics, and made great strides, particularly in mathematics. So yes, it just gives you an indication of how far ahead they really are. Theme Master asks, with objectivism, books, interviews, and debates helping to change people, could some live talks be somewhat more leaned towards invoking emotions by discussing world problems caused by altruism to get more people to share? I think I understand the question. I'm not sure I do. But I think what you're asking is, could we be more emotional in our talks since there's so much of it? And yes, and I think I do that. So I'm not exactly sure. Could we be more descriptive? Could we be more evoking of the damage altruism does in the audience's lives? I think we could, and use that in order to get people to realize the damage of altruism. Yes, I think we could, and I think that's part of good speaking. Good speaking is to try to get people to identify the issues, personally identify the issues you're talking about, and to have that integration of mind and emotion, of the thinking and the emotion. So I think the answer is yes, if I understand the question right. Okay, David asks, Say's law is supply equals demand. Not exactly. The demand does not equal supply, is my opinion. The demand does not equal supply. The greatest fault of economics in this era, COVID shutdowns and COVID spending, demonstrates this or not. I mean, I don't know exactly, again, I don't understand exactly the question. And Say's law is not supply equals demand. Say's law is that supply creates its own demand. That if you supply something of value, demand will arise. And if it doesn't, you can adjust the price until it will. You can have a sale. I don't think COVID rejects that. I don't think COVID is a violation of the principle associated with supply and demand. I think what you're seeing during COVID is sometimes it takes time. No, the supply equals demand always, right? So the question is, are prices allowed to adjust or not? Are quantities allowed to adjust or not? So for example, if during COVID you had a shortage of toilet paper, that shortage could only persist because the laws of economics were not allowed to apply, because legally you couldn't gouge. But imagine supermarkets had raised prices. They'd raised prices to the point where supply would have matched demand and would have raised prices, and so that demand would have come down. And as demand came down, that would allow time for producers to produce more toilet paper to fill the shelves. What COVID showed us was when government intervenes in the process, and it's a process, it's not instantaneous, of supply and demand matching up and prices adjusting accordingly, then you get distortions and perversions. And the whole supply chain problem is a problem of government interfering in the ability of supply and demand to match up, and again, prices to adjust. So I think I answered the question. David asked, same David, I think, how many people will die this winter from lack of fossil fuels in Europe? I don't know, because it's not clear that there really is a shortage. It's not clear exactly what is going on. And, it's how much of this is political, how much of this is real, and how bad is it? I don't know. People die in winter generally. How many of them will die of shortages of fossil fuel? We'll see. If a lot, maybe that'll be a wake-up call for people that we need more. And maybe at least at a grassroots level, people will reject the insanity of the climate change hysteria and invest more in LNG, in LNG facilities, in natural gas. There's huge quantities all over the world of natural gas, including, by the way, in Great Britain. You could drill and frack and get huge quantities of natural gas. They refuse to do it for reasons that, fracking supposedly does damage to, I don't know, to something, some environmental hysteria. But Israel has huge quantities of natural gas out in the Mediterranean. So does Cyprus, so does Turkey. At some point they'll build, and if the regulators get out of the way, they'll do this fast, build pipelines into Europe. There's zero reason to have shortages. And maybe this will wake people up, politically shake things up and require people to wake up to the reality that how dependent they are, justifiably dependent on natural gas, and therefore they should make it more available, not less. All right, let's see. I think we have two more $20 questions. I mean, Australian question, $20, but I'll count it. Justin asks from Australia, has the rental freeze substantially contributed to the labor shortage mobility? Good question. Yeah, I mean, certainly to mobility, people are not going to leave a frozen rent because they would have to go and renegotiate rents in a new place. Most of those freezes are going away now. So we should start seeing, more mobility return. But, a lot of the benefits, a lot of the refunds, a lot of the government goodies were dependent on, had a particular address to it. If you change the address, it might not show up, it might not come. Generally, government programs, government intervention, government welfare of any kind reduces mobility because it's associated with a particular place, a particular state, a particular address. Rob, there's a lot of talk about how images of beautiful people in advertising create anxiety and depression for average, let alone disabled people, so reform is needed. What does that say about our world right now? It says that the world we live in is a world in which morality standards are set by in whatever category, those who perceive themselves as the biggest victims of genes, I'm ugly, victims of circumstances, I got into an accident and I'm disabled. But this is the culmination of altruism. This is what altruism leads to. It leads to the setting of standards based on the least able, the least good looking, the least whatever. And it's why in New York they've canceled all programs for exceptional kids have now been dismantled. It's unfair to recognize the exceptional, to recognize the able. It's, again, ableism. So it's very much this is altruism on steroids, and it's egalitarianism, right? This is the idea of pulling everybody down to the lowest common denominator. This is about if some people are beautiful and some people are ugly, let's scar everybody who's beautiful. If some people are smart and some people are dumb, then let's make it impossible for smart people to manifest their smartness, whether it's by not taking them into college, whether it's by not providing them with these kind of programs that allow them to leverage it. This is the real consequence of altruism, and it's horrific, it's evil. Of altruism, and it's egalitarianism. Leonard Peikoff talks about the evil of egalitarianism. There's no bigger evil in the world than the evil of egalitarianism. There's nothing more nihilistic. There's nothing more hateful and destructive than egalitarianism, and that's what we're seeing in the world all around us right now. All right. All the other questions are $5 and $10 questions. Okay, we're gonna do a quick round with our panelists, but I'm asking for short questions. We're going to make this quick because we're already, an hour and a half into this, and we've got a lot of panelists, and we've got still a lot of Super Chat questions to get through. So this is going to go well over 2 hours. Even though Jonathan left, he's always wanted a 3-hour Yaron Book Show, so he might get it today. All right, we'll start with Adam.
Yes. I think the fact that they're doing this and doing away with schools for bright kids just means we're getting a bigger audience on YouTube and other media that distribute university level courses. And I think it's going to be much better for a kid to listen to MIT lectures than go to Stuyvesant High School.
Maybe I still worry about the kid who maybe the Stuyvesant High School would have inspired them to become something great, and on YouTube they watch cat videos instead for a variety of psychological reasons that have nothing to do with that. Particularly with kids. The kind of stimulus, the kind of support they get. Maybe it's a kid who doesn't have support at home. Maybe it's a kid that doesn't have easy access to the internet at home. And Stuyvesant was their way out of the ghetto or out of poverty or out of all those hurdles. And now they're not going to have it. So I think it's tragic. I think it's a disaster. I do agree with you on this. I don't think it's popular. I don't think most Americans like it. I don't think it's a winning strategy for the left. I think the more this is done, the more resentment and rebellion against the left you will see. And you're already seeing it where people are in uproar about this. But the poor kids who are not getting this opportunity are going to, some kids are going to suffer because of this, and that's tragic and sad. And of course, it's broader than that. The fact is that we're going to see billboards of ugly people. We're going to see, or we're already seeing it to some extent. You're going to see advertising where, it just reduces the aesthetic value of life. So mediocrity and the emphasis on mediocrity is not a good thing. Not a good thing. MMTMSS26. The best thing is if you could email me, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com, rather than me copying this over and remembering to email you, which is less likely. Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. You can get me, and given that you want to book me for a speaking engagement, I am sure to answer. Debbie.
Trying to think of a short question. Mine are never short. Maybe come back to me.
Well, ask a question. I'll make my answer short.
Okay, sounds good. So Andrew's question got me thinking about just how much there is a gap in leadership skills. I mean, there's a lot of crappy managers out there, the majority that I've had. I've had one amazing manager, and I've had a lot of that range between decent and terrible. Right. And so there's, and that's not like just at one company, that's throughout my career. And even before I was a professional, when I was working in menial jobs, it doesn't make much difference. It's actually hard to find. I do think it's getting better because people are starting to realize that managing people is a different skill than doing the things that the people you manage do. It's like that dawned on people maybe about 10 years ago. But what do you think is the issue here? Why there's such a disconnect in good leaders?
Because people are hard. So being a good manager is hard. It means having the ability to read other people. It means having the ability to motivate other people. it means dealing with other people, and dealing with other people is just not easy because you're dealing with different psychologies and different human beings. And if you have a team, every one of the team members is different. So having the ability to address, it's not exactly the needs, but in a sense, it's the needs of every one of those people, in spite of the fact that they're all different, is objectively hard. It's not easy. And it's a skill set that's hard to teach. You can teach it. And I think some people are good at teaching it, but it's not taught anywhere, really. It's certainly not taught in MBA school. MBA programs are not geared to teaching. You study management, which is, I think the technical term is BS. It's mostly, nonsense. It's mostly management and in theory, but it doesn't have that psychological aspect. It doesn't have the aspect of motivation. It doesn't have the aspect of, it has more to do with labor law, I think, if I remember right, than actually how to deal with human beings. So nobody teaches it really. And then because there's so many bad managers, it becomes what you're taught in MBA school is process. You're not taught the skill of dealing with other people. So you can be great at process. You can be great in flow charts. You can be great at Gantt charts, right? But to actually motivate people to execute and know who should execute what and how to motivate them to do a good job at it is a completely different skill set. So you need the right kind of training. And then what happens is, because there are a lot of bad managers, then people learn from bad examples. They learn from the people who manage them, and the people who manage them are not good. So you need to be pretty introspective to figure out, I don't want to be like my bad manager. What's he doing badly? What should I do well? And those are the better people. And those are the people who rise up and be successful in management. But it's hard. That's my bottom line. And partially that's because I'll say that because I've never really had a manager. I've always been the manager. And not ever having had a manager made being a manager much more difficult. So I had to, in a sense, figure it out by myself. And I didn't have anything to draw from. And I, as I said, nobody ever taught it. So it was difficult. But management skills are incredibly valuable. And if you can articulate what they are, there's real value there for an enterprise and for a business.
Yeah, I agree. I think objectivism has a lot to offer, but
Yes.
I'm going to just cut my comments off in the interest of time.
Yep.
Maybe revisit next time.
We'll have to revisit management because it's a fascinating topic. And I'm sure
Yes.
you have a lot of insight into it because, from all I can tell, you are a good manager, which is rare. All right, let's go to Nick.
You hear me?
Yep, can hear you now.
Okay. I wanted to ask a question. Maybe this is a topic for a show because it was strained for time. I wanted to ask about the $10 trillion man. Do you know who that is?
No.
That's Larry Fink, because he controls $10 trillion worth of assets.
I've talked about
BlackRock.
BlackRock. Yeah.
So no, but he's pushing his ESG. The reason I brought him up is because he's pushing his ESG agenda.
Yes, he is.
His version of ESG with sustainable investing, what he calls sustainable investing. So I thought it'd be a good show to cover the various flavors of ESG. If there are any, palatable ones, they're all horrific, but the one, he's got tremendous influence. He has 139 sustainable ETFs. He's just huge. He's in equity, fixed income, and he's pushing it hard. And he got raked over the coals the other day on MSNBC for his hypocrisy with his relationship with China. So,
to be a so-called conscious investor or responsible, you have to be a hypocrite because there's no way to do it. It's an impossible task the way they've set it up. I'm giving a talk on ESG. When am I giving the talk? Yes, on Tuesday, the 26th, a week from today, at Columbia University. I mean, it'll be on Zoom, so you'll be able to watch it. I'll stream it live. It'll be on ESG mandates and capitalism. The role, we'll see how I take it. But yeah, BlackRock is a big issue with this. We can talk about why BlackRock even exists, how it could be a $10 trillion fund. But let me just leave you with this. Funny thing is that if you look at all those sustainable portfolios that BlackRock claims are ESG, and you compare them to just regular diversified portfolio of stocks, the overlap is unbelievable. So you can make anything ESG if you're willing to be a hypocrite and you're willing to, it's a marketing tool right now more than anything else. But it's also a way to undermine capitalism. It's also a way to undermine the profit motive and a way to undermine the idea of shareholder wealth maximization as a goal for a corporation. So it's
Is there an anti-ESG fund?
What's
Is
that?
there an anti-ESG fund?
Not
It's
as
just
far as
maybe
almost-
that just focuses on the governance
all
side.
the funds that actually there to make money are anti-ESG funds.
They give you the best returns.
Yep.
It's just like the tobacco industry. It's the biggest. Over the last 40 years, it has showed the best returns.
Yep.
Because they do share buybacks and they increase their dividends.
Share
And they give
buybacks and dividends are not what cause returns, but we can do that another time. What cause returns is the free cash flow they generate. They generate a lot of money. How they choose to distribute that money to shareholders does not determine the returns. Share buybacks do not affect returns long term.
So how are the free cash flow yields that high then?
Free cash flow yields are high because
companies.
their profit margin is very high. They have very little to invest in. They have no R&D. And because of the government restricts competition for tobacco, they have basically a kind of a duopoly or monopoly over it. So they rake in money. They make a fortune. And most of the money comes from overseas because they don't sell that many cigarettes in the US. But it's good to be in an industry where the government does not want competitors, because then, right?
Okay, so there's other, but are there many flavors of ESG in your mind?
Yeah, yes. I mean,
So maybe you can cover that one day.
Every single ESG fund has its own flavor because there's no objective way to determine what ESG is.
So it's a moving target, in other words.
Constantly, and everybody interprets it the way they want to interpret it to make the investments they want to invest. And if you ask Greta what her
I was just going to mention Greta.
is going to be different than other people's view of ESG. It's a completely
Greta says blah blah blah.
blah 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 ESG.
30 years, blah blah blah. 2030, blah blah blah.
Hey, Daniel.
Quickly, this month, the World Health Organization said that there was a new vaccine for malaria. And I did a little quick research on DDT. Prior to it being banned back in the late 60s, early 70s, malaria was almost wiped out.
Yep.
Today, it kills almost 500,000 people per year. And even the World Health Organization in 2006 asked people to start using it again indoors.
Yep.
I haven't heard the EPA apologize.
No, they never will. It causes eagles' eggs to be thinner, and therefore, more eagles to abort, and therefore eagles might extinct. So what? So what, Daniel? You're so insensitive if 500,000 people have to die every year in order to save the eagles. No, Rachel Carson wrote a book in 1962 or 3 or whatever it was. And Richard Nixon passed, gave us the EPA in 1971 or 2 or whatever. And yeah, no way. In Africa, they use DDT laced tents. So the stuff is laced with it, but they don't spray it. Not because it hurts human beings, but because it might hurt an animal or two, but there's no even significant evidence of that. It's horrific. Millions and millions of people have died because of this. And yeah, it's truly tragic.
Thank you.
And hopefully there's a vaccine to malaria, because they're not going to legalize DDT. So at least we'll get a vaccine for malaria. At least we'll get that.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan.
Sure. Real quick, do you have like one favorite principle that you take from objectivism for like daily living? Like your favorite one, or is that quick enough?
I don't know. I mean, rules, listen to my you on rules for life.
Yeah.
I think live, capital L, every day counts. Every day matters. You don't get them back. Live life to the fullest if you can every single day. I think that's the thing I take. And then everything else comes from your appetite to live, your desire to live,
right?
Your decision to live, really. By the way, the lecture next week, I'll just stream it on my channel. It's on Zoom. Columbia University, in their wisdom, does not allow live events yet. So they won't allow me to do a live event in Columbia University. I could do it at University of Pennsylvania, and the students all wear masks, but I can't do it at Columbia University. So I have to do this. All right, that was Ryan. Let's see, who are we missing? Corey, and then Andrew.
Yeah. Any plans for a trip to Australia in the future, or has the last year and a bit tainted that?
No, I'd love to come to Australia. China I'm not going to, but Australia I would love to. It's money. If somebody pays for my trip, I'll go. So basically, if I could come to Australia and do, I don't know, 10 talks and be able to get, I don't know, $3,000-4,000 a talk, then I would come. That's the bottom line. It's I might come on vacation anyway at some point, but I'd love to come and do a speaking tour in Australia. And for that, I'd need somebody to pay the bill.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It'll happen at some point.
Yeah.
By the way, talk about rules for life and paying. I'm thinking of turning Rules for Life into a book, right? So I'm starting to think about how much it would cost because I need a co-author. So I'm thinking of, if there's anybody out there who would like to help finance and fund a book version of Your On Rules for Life, send me an email or let me know in the chat or something. We'd probably need a few, it's not a huge amount, but we'd probably need, I think, between $30,000 to $50,000, and we could get a book out, which would be a lot of fun. So, and I think it would be an interesting book. All right, Andrew, you got the last live question, and then we'll run through these super chat questions quickly. Andrew, are you there? Or 917, is that not Andrew? Is that Jennifer?
Hey, you're on. Sorry.
Yeah, it is Andrew.
Okay. If there are analogies right now to the 1970s,
yeah,
can you foresee a response like the 1980s, or is the right too weak on capitalism for that to be possible?
Look, if you were sitting in 1970, when was it, 2 or 3 or 1? I don't always get my dates, the Nixon date right. And Nixon has just imposed price controls, and people around the White House are wearing buttons with stop inflation now, buttons, literally buttons. Economists are wearing buttons. I think Greenspan wore this button, which is absurd and ridiculous. Then could you have imagined the 1980s? No, I don't think you could have. So I don't see it now. I don't see where it would come from. I don't see who would inspire it, but it's certainly possible. And I think ultimately it's what we need to shoot for. We're not going to get an objectivist decade. We're not going to get objectivists elected into the White House. The best we can hope for is some kind of a conservative Republican, relatively speaking, pro-capitalist, optimistic, pro-technology, pro-markets Republican who can win sometime down the road. Now, so I can't imagine it because I don't know who the people would be. And I look at the electorate. That's what really scares me. But I'm not sure if anybody sitting in 1972 could have seen it coming either. Remember, 1972, Richard Nixon, one of the worst Republicans ever, a statist, if ever there was one, ran against McGovern, the most socialist Democratic candidate other than Bernie Sanders, but he actually ran for president. He was actually nominated by his party. So Bernie Sanders running for president. It was pretty bad. I don't know that anybody could have predicted it then either. All right, thanks to the panelists. Let's turn to quickly. Corey, thank you for being with us. Where are we in terms of the super chat? How we're about, I don't know, $80 short, $85 short. So I don't know if some of you want to make Ali's day and step in here and get us to the target quickly. It wouldn't take much, but that'd be terrific if we could make the $600 goal again today and keep the streak alive. I think we've made it most of this month, if not all of this month. Yeah, it was whip inflation now, which was under Jerry Ford, but the same mentality. All right, let's see. Cook asked, found out that 7 of Thomas Sowell's books were included with my Audible membership, already downloaded and started listening. Cool, enjoy, Cook. I think you'll really enjoy them and learn a lot from them. Michael says, where did the strong collective ethos in Asian countries come from without Christianity? I think it comes from mysticism. It comes from a lack in Asian philosophy of a concept of reason. I think it's very hard to come up with a concept of individualism without the idea of reason, because that is the tool for the individual to survive. Otherwise, it seems like we need the collective in order to protect us and to survive. So it seems like the tribe is primary. Mysticism, you need somebody to tell you what the truth is under mysticism. So you're dependent on others for your truth. Reason is the only means by which you can discover truth by yourself. Asian philosophers never discovered the concept of reason, and that has held them back and really solidified collectivism in there. Confucius, of course, has a form of collectivism. I think it's less damaging than Christianity because it's more about social status and hierarchy, but it's still very, very collectivistic and if you combine it with Buddhism and all the other religions, not good. Okay, Michael asked, did Aristotle give existence identity, whereas Ayn Rand gave consciousness identity? No. I mean, nobody gave existence identity. Existence has identity. Aristotle identified existence, and I think Ayn Rand identified the axiom of existence exists in a sense, and A is A, that existence. He identified that. He didn't give it, right? So, and neither did Ayn Rand give consciousness identity. She identified the fact that consciousness has identity. I don't know if Ayn Rand is the first to identify the primacy of consciousness and the identity of consciousness. I don't know enough about the history of philosophy to know if she was the first, and to see the relationship between existence and identity, and existence and consciousness. So I'm not sure. I think those formulations are uniquely Ayn Rand. Those connections between existence, identity, and consciousness are uniquely Ayn Rand. Michael also asked, are the rules of engagement worse in Israel than the US? I think they're about the same. I think they're worse in Israel in the sense that for Israel, war is existential. That is, losing a war is a risk to its survival. and therefore the consequences of the rules of engagement are worse for Israel than they are for the United States. In a sense, the United States can afford them, the altruism and the irrationality. Israel cannot afford them. And in that sense, they're worse. Neither country can afford them. They're evil no matter who does them. But are they worse in practice? Probably not. They're probably about the same. And Israel learned them from America. There's no question what the threat is. Israel learned them from the US. Michael asks, thank God Rand decided to write novels. If she only published academic papers, intellectuals would have buried her and no one would know her name. At least for a while, that is true. But of course, Ayn Rand never, in no conception of Ayn Rand was she ever going to write academic papers and not novels. She wrote novels, and then thankfully, she also wrote philosophy. It's the other way around. Scott asks, since Reason TV helped Wolf debates get so many views, I'm curious if you or AOI have considered collaborating on projects with them to capitalize. No, Reason got so many views for the one Wolf debate with what's his name, Gene Epstein, because they put on the debate. It was a debate that was sponsored by Reason. All the debates at the Soho Forum are sponsored by Reason. I participated in a debate at Soho Forum that was promoted by Reason and got a lot of attention. I don't mind doing that, but I would not partner with Reason on anything. They have an attitude towards Ayn Rand, which I think in many ways is despicable. They make fun of her, they ridicule her, they present her they strawman her constantly, and I would not sanction that kind of behavior by partnering with them. So I know you guys want me to partner with everybody as long as you get views. As long as you get the views, doesn't matter. Even if you partner, if Hitler was around and going up on stage with Hitler would get me views, then you guys would be for it. Sorry, Ayn Rand, Leonard Peikoff taught me differently. Michael Sanders asks, why do some people have kids they don't give a shit about? Is it altruism not taking values seriously? Yeah, I think it's partially altruism. It's partially they have kids out of a sense of duty. They are not rational. All of those are absolutely right. Apollo says, you, Leonard Peikoff, and Ayn Rand are great men. Well, Ayn Rand wasn't a man, although she liked to call herself a man in a sense, in some sense. But yeah, don't put me with Leonard Peikoff and Ayn Rand. Not in the same ballpark, not in the same category. They're way up there. I'm down here somewhere, and it's not. Yeah, they are philosophers. I am not. They are geniuses. I am not. It's not. I'm not in the same category. So don't. And that's not a false sense of modesty. It's me being objective about ability. I can take what they've taught me and communicate it effectively and entertainingly and in a variety of different ways. But I'm not an originator, and I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not an originator of ideas the way they were. Michael asks, why didn't you bring up Ayn Rand at all during your debate with Wolf? I did once. I said, as Ayn Rand said, capitalism is an unknown ideal, because I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it. I think that anybody who says, that Yaron guy was interesting, can look me up. They'll find Ayn Rand all over my bio, and they will go and they will read her because of that, or they will listen to the show where everything is connected to Ayn Rand. I don't think it makes sense to go out there. And if you look at Leonard Peikoff's 1984 debate, Leonard and John Whitpath, I don't think they mention Ayn Rand a lot in the debate. You're debating socialism versus capitalism, and you do the best job that you can in your own terms, in your own words. And because of your association, I'm introduced as the chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute. People get that that's the perspective I'm coming from, and if they want to do the research, they'll find it very, very easily. I'm not one who believes that the right kind of marketing is to go and constantly quote and mention Ayn Rand in everything that I do. I think it comes off as I don't know. It doesn't come off right. I think it turns people off, not on. Why do you think the future society will be based on objectivism, but not explicitly objectivism itself? Because I don't know what an objectivist society is. Objectivism is a philosophy. People will live that philosophy. So I don't know, and I don't think most people think of themselves as objectivists any more than people think of themselves as Kantian today, even though Kant infuses much of what they think and much of what they do. It'll just be second nature to them. It'll be reality. It'll be, obvious. They won't make a big deal out of the fact that they are objectivists. They will know its origins. They'll be taught that in the same way that we know that, science was born with Aristotle. Does that make all scientists Aristotelians? They don't think of themselves that way. Daniel says, don't watch Squid Game. It's terrible. Somebody's paying me $2,000 to watch them. I will watch them. I've seen the first episode. I have no idea where this show is going. Well, I think I do. And I think I understand already what its goals are and what its motivation is. It seems like basically the same kind of attitude as Parasite, that movie called Parasite that I reviewed a few years back. I'm going to watch the whole thing, and I will get back to you with the review. I'll do a review of Squid Games. It is the most watched show on Netflix ever, supposedly. So it's a cultural phenomena. I have to watch it. It's my job to watch it, and I'm getting paid to do it. So I will do it. Why do socialists seem to think that if you lose your job, you'll never find another one and starve? Because they've never been in the job market, because they can't think, because they have no experience in the real world, because they don't use their mind. I don't know why they think that, because like everybody else, they're detached, they're detached from reality, and they want to sensationalize everything, and they want you to panic, and they want you to feel fear. They're motivated by fear. Shazbat says, I've heard the newborn babies are essentially still fetuses. From a developmental standpoint, we have evolved to push out babies early to accommodate large size of the head. Yes, but they are different in a sense that they now open their eyes, and light, if nothing else, and everything else around motion are stimulants. And you can tell from every single day that the baby is developing, that it's getting more aware that something is happening inside there. So it's not that for the first 2 weeks, nothing happens, and then, whoa, the brain grows to a size where stuff happens. No, as soon as it's born, its eyes are open and stuff starts happening. It cries, it gets a response because it's crying, and there's already some form of interaction going on. There's a crazy guy on Twitter saying, you're working with a criminal. If you know about this, can you please dispel the lies about this Richard Mins guy? He says you refuse to discuss the facts. I just see no relevance of this. I mean, the guy who's doing this is a despicable guy who's been after me for 15 years. He runs, as far as I can tell, he runs the ARI Watch, which is a horrible website that contributes to lies against me, to lies against the Institute. It's an anti-objectivist, anti-reality, anti-Ayn Rand site. The guy who runs the site is dedicated to hating me, objectivism, and so on. So I want to give him no credence. I will say this, I have no business relationship with Richard Mins. The Institute doesn't have a business relationship with Richard Mins. We do nothing with him. But beyond that, I don't want to give any credence to this creep who keeps following me around and talking about this. The best thing to do about people like that is to ignore them, and that's what I intend to do. Ed Kalski asks, I think it would help painting a picture of a rational future. I don't think we do that enough. That would get people more emotional. Yeah, I'm all for painting a picture of a rational future. Some novelists should write a book, a science fiction book, about what a rational future would look like. That would be fantastic. All right, everybody. It's already after 10 o'clock. It's bedtime. Thanks, everybody, for sticking with us. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the support. We're a little short of the 600. We're like $72 short of the 600. I don't know if anybody wants to step in and give us $72 just so we can say we're staying consistent with above 600. But in any case, no matter whether you do it or not, I'm saying good night to everybody. Don't forget to support the show on youronbookshow.com/support, on Patreon, and Subscribe Star, on Locals. Don't forget to share and to like before you leave. Press the like button, and I will see you all probably either Sunday or Monday. I'm going to be in Austin, Texas at a seminar the rest of this week, and Sunday will be all day traveling. So if I have the energy when I get back off the plane, I'll do a show Sunday night. But if not, I'll do one Monday night, and I'll see you all then. Allie is very, very, very sad. She has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sad faces all in a row. I don't do emojis. I don't know what that means, but I assume that means something very, very sad has befallen her. But I'm sure you guys will make it all up to Allie next show. All right, everybody, have a great night. I'll see you all. I have to go pack so I can catch